We continue with order paper number 2, and I call on Shivesha Katasti, Treasury Minister, to move item 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a privilege to give my first budget speech to this honourable court. Economic conditions during the last year have been dominated by regional and global factors, most notably the recovery from the COVID pandemic and the renewed Russian military aggression in the Ukraine. These factors have combined to create an inflationary situation unprecedented in recent times, driven by sharp increases in prices for energy, food and key commodities. The impact of these increases on the most vulnerable in society, along with the dampening effect they're having on economic confidence more widely, has led this administration to implement a range of support measures. There's been a coordinated effort across government to provide targeted financial support to those on low incomes and supply energy efficiency measures to allow our community to adapt and adjust to higher electricity, gas and oil prices. But at the same time, we've seized this opportunity to bring forward the essential changes and investment necessary to meet the environmental challenges and the ambitious targets we've set out in our Climate Change Action Plan. During our response to the rising cost of living, we've invested tens of millions of pounds through initiatives which sought to cushion some of the effects for residents and businesses. This has included £17.8 million in emergency support payments to those most vulnerable in our community. Capping electricity costs has meant that over the past 6 months, we've had some of the lowest prices in Europe. And we followed this up by capping bus fares, creating a £100,000 Community Warm Spaces Fund and an £8 million energy efficiency scheme. But, Mr. President, I think it's important to highlight that in the face of these challenges, we shouldn't forget that our nation has still seen further economic growth over the past year. We've trained 163 entrepreneurs through the Micro Business Grant Scheme and provided over £380,000 towards helping these businesses set up in the Isle of Man. We've also committed a further £690,000 towards business expansion projects through the Financial Assistance Scheme. Employment incentives offered through the Department for Enterprise have supported a further 115 jobs. Through the Digital Executive Agency, we've seen 268 new roles created across their sector last year. We've seen consistent growth in e-gaming licences, with 75 now being supervised at one time, the highest ever, and a 15% increase on the previous year. Moreover, 2022 saw an increase in the tax registrations compared to the previous year, with 57% of these being people aged under 40, an important statistic to track as we look to rebalance the population and reduce the dependency ratio through a range of policies outlined in our economic strategy. Thanks to our economy's resilience, we saw the creation of around 1,200 new jobs across the private sector last year. 1,700 new work permits and 2,400 new visas have been issued, demonstrating inward migration. In addition to this, we've seen continual interest in moving to the Isle of Man through the Locate team, with an average of 300 inquiries each quarter. But we know from all business sectors that workforce shortages and inflation are the key challenges to their future growth. We have to keep working to make the Isle of Man a magnet for good quality, well-paid and jobs and new sectors which will be vital to fund the improvements in our key public services. Mr. President, you'll be aware that this year we have made a number of radical changes within the budget process itself. These changes have been designed to increase engagement and create a more collaborative way to set departmental budgets. Instead of endless discussions over extra revenue bids, we have provided departments with the autonomy and responsibility to prioritise their total budget allocation against the key services and spending priorities in line with their department plans, while providing guidance on the assumptions made in the overall medium-term financial plan. We've worked with honourable members to provide the opportunity to gain views on the department financial plans and their priorities against the overall financial envelope available. This has informed Treasury in the distribution of budgets. The budget in front of you today shows that we are investing heavily in our healthcare and education service. The Department for Health and Social Care will receive an extra £21 million for 2023-24, and the Department for Education, Sport and Culture will get an increase to their budget of just under £12 million. DEFRA will benefit from an extra £2 million to enable them to support the agricultural sector and meet the challenges of ash dieback. DOI will get an extra £4.6 million to concentrate on an ambitious infrastructure maintenance programme. Public safety is perhaps something we take for granted, but it is vital that this key essence of island life is protected. The Department for Home Affairs will be given an extra £2.1 million. We recognise that with every new approach, there are always improvements that can be made. We will shortly be reviewing these changes, ensuring that feedback from honourable members and departments is considered, which will help us improve the process for next year. Mr. President, we think it's also essential to make some changes to the budgetary process for capital expenditure. Over previous years, we've consistently achieved project delivery rates of only 50% compared to the overall capital budget allocated in the plan. We believe this underachievement is a result of schemes being financially provided for without the detailed business cases and costings to support them. This has led to an overburdened programme and an overcommitment of our financial resources. We focused on the creation of a realistic and deliverable capital programme which will be fully funded from revenue in the medium term. Only active schemes have been included in the main programme, and those that require further feasibility studies and design have been redirected to the Project Development Fund. The fund has been provided with an additional £8 million to support this change. This will enable departments to carefully scope and develop schemes which can be fully designed and costed before they come before Tynwald, giving additional information and confidence to members that when they come to vote on proposals, one of the major first schemes to go through the new process will be the replacement for the Castle Rushen High School. We recognise that schemes will be developed throughout the year and therefore are proposing a fundamental change in the way that capital schemes are approved. Rather than having only one opportunity to seek approval for funding at the time of the budget, we propose that there are a total of 4 opportunities in the year: February, June, September and November. We believe that this will improve our financial planning process and ensure that only fully developed schemes are presented to Tynwald for approval and implementation. Mr. President, the projected outturn for the 2022-23 financial year is a surplus in general revenue of £10.9 million against the budgeted surplus of just under £0.5 million. The projected surplus, however, includes just under £40 million of contingency support for departments, for pay awards of 6% and the increased service and energy costs. The overall surplus is the net result of achieving better than anticipated income tax receipts. The financial challenge seen by departments this year will likely continue into next year, but at what level remains to be seen. The budget presented before this Honourable Court today includes a 5% increase in income targets, a 6% increase in pay costs, and a 5% increase in non-pay costs. However, each department has been provided with a cost-saving target of 1.5% on non-pay costs to align with cost improvement plans and to drive forward efficient service provision. Support is being provided to enable these cost efficiencies through the repurposed Transformation Fund. Overall, Treasury income has been increased to include a dividend of £1 million from the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company and a further £500,000 from the Isle of Man Post Office. Both government-owned entities have seen a positive recovery since the pandemic, and we feel it is appropriate to ensure contributions to general revenue is achieved to represent the previous investments made. The revised 5-year financial plan is a foundation on which to build and grow a more sustainable economy. The economic strategy has ambitions to further develop the infrastructure and services of our community to provide for an estimated population of 100,000 by 2037 and to generate over £200 million of additional annual income to reinvest in services and our quality of life by 2032. In order to do this, we must ensure our finances are strong and are able to support the strategy to invest in our people, our businesses and our island's future. In this budget, we've created a £100 million economic strategy fund to drive these ambitions and help leverage private investment. But to fully fund this investment in our island and our people, we will once again need to draw down heavily on reserves to bridge the gap between income and expenditure. The budget before you shows an initial annual structural deficit of £152 million, which will gradually reduce over the following 4 years. Our significant reserves have been established by previous generations, and the work and effort that went on to building these should never be underestimated. It's essential that we develop our economy and increase government revenue so that we can start to replenish these reserves for the benefit of generations to come. Mr. President, turning now to national insurance, receipts up to the end of January show that we are on course to exceed the budget forecast for 2022-23. Whilst this is positive news, there are many headwinds facing the national insurance scheme, and these have been highlighted in the latest report produced by the UK's Government Actuarial Department. This report, which is to be laid before the April sitting of Tynwald, predicts that if nothing is done, the funds will be exhausted by 2047-48, 5 years sooner than previously forecast. The report highlights the pressures the scheme will face in future years, such as a reduction in the working population and increases in expenditure due to the triple lock uprating policy. Treasury are already looking at what needs to be done to ensure that the national insurance scheme remains sustainable and not only supports the payment of benefits and pensions now, but also supports the wider island economy. It's essential that we look again at how we uprate pensions to ensure the fund can continue to support those who have already retired. But we must also re-establish the social contract that exists between the young and the older members of our community to confront the challenges of delivering intergenerational fairness. As a start to modernising the current scheme, last year the Treasury went out to consultation on a number of fairness in relation to national insurance. Over 300 responses were received, and I would like to thank everyone who took part. Treasury have published their responses on the consultation hub, and I would like to highlight the actions to be taken in the short term. Turning firstly to the self-employed, there was significant support for merging the payment of Class 2 monthly contributions with the payment of Class 4, and I intend to bring forward legislation in the coming tax year to enable this to happen. Providing Tynwald approve the proposed arrangements, the 2023-24 tax year will be the last year that the majority of those who are self-employed will pay their Class 2 contributions on a monthly basis. The consultation also revealed significant support for ensuring that all individuals who are employed should pay NI, regardless of how they structure their affairs. This is particularly relevant to owner-managed business individuals who work through these structures and can arrange their income to be paid in such a way that they don't pay NI, but still build up entitlements to a state pension and other benefits. Treasury believes that reviewing this situation is fundamental to ensure our scheme is fair and that all those who benefit from it contribute to it. However, I recognise that there are many issues that need to be discussed further, and therefore Treasury will engage with relevant stakeholders before drafting legislation during the 2024-25 tax year. Turning now to national insurance rates and thresholds for the coming tax year. There will be no rise in the rates of NI for employees and employers, and the Class 4 rates paid by the self-employed will remain unchanged. The 2017 report on the Manx National Insurance Fund assumed that the thresholds and limits for Class 1 and Class 4 would need to increase each year, and I can confirm that I will be bringing orders to this court later to increase these amounts by 5%. The only limit that will not change is the lower earnings limit. The weekly rates for Class 2 for both the self-employed and share fishermen will increase, along with Class 3 voluntary contributions that individuals pay to build up their state pension rights. The National Insurance Holiday Scheme was introduced from April 2019, and I can confirm that it will continue for the next tax year. Since the scheme has been introduced, salaries have increased, and therefore I intend to raise the qualifying salary for new residents to £23,000 and the maximum amount of a refund that can be claimed to £4,400. Finally, I would like to turn to the contribution the National Insurance Scheme makes to the NHS in our island. Last year, the Treasury Minister announced that additional monies were being taken from the NI Fund to cover the DHSC funding gap. It was envisaged that this would be a one-off withdrawal and that Treasury and the Department would bring forward plans as to how the projected funding gap, which is forecast to grow by about £8 million each year, would be addressed. These plans have yet to be developed, and while we've been able to find half of next year's money from general revenue, a further £8.5 million will need to be drawn down from the NI Fund for the 2023-24 financial year. The order I will present later once again limits this withdrawal for 1 year only. Our nation's total reserves are currently around £1.7 billion, and the NI Fund makes up £974 million of this. This withdrawal is equivalent to about half of the interest the fund earned last year. This year, Tynwald would need to take some difficult but decisive decisions regarding our health and social care system to ensure we can increase the income and skills of our key workers and meet the needs of all those who rely on our essential services. Mr. President, I will now turn my attention to taxation. So far this year, our income tax receipts have been strong and are currently forecast to be around £272 million, demonstrating the robustness of our economy. That having been said, the increase in inflation and the cost of living gives rise to economic uncertainties for the island, leaving me little choice but to keep taxation stable. There will therefore be no changes to the rates of taxation, and the personal allowance will remain at £14,500 for an individual and £29,000 for a jointly assessed couple. However, there will be a change for those with a total income in excess of £100,000. From the 6th of April 2023, these higher earners will have their personal allowance reduced by £1 for every £2 of total income over £100,000. In essence, this means that a person with a total income of £129,000 or over, or £258,000 or over in the case of jointly assessed couple, will have their personal allowance reduced to zero. This progressive measure means that those who have more pay more. Over previous months, you will recall me stating in this court that employers wishing to offer staff help with the rising cost of living may consider offering vouchers that can be redeemed for goods. The limit is £600 and incorporates all benefits provided by an employer in any one tax year. At present, if more than £600 of general benefits in kind is provided by an employer to an employee, then the whole amount is taxable. Today I'm pleased to announce the removal of this cliff edge. From the 6th of April 2023, the first £600 of general benefit in kind will not be liable to income tax, meaning only that the amount over £600 will be subject to taxation. This is a positive step in ensuring that employees benefit by receiving more from what is offered. Mr. President, as set out in the Island Plan and also recommended by the Economic Strategy, Treasury is working on a new tax strategy. This strategy will be built on an evaluation of our tax system and will look to establish the main themes that will guide tax policy formation in the Isle of Man for the remainder of this administration. It will also provide a high-level work plan for the key tax policy initiatives in relation to each of the policy themes. To date, the work on the tax strategy has been carried out in-house by Treasury officers, but the next step is to seek local experts' input. The Island Plan refers to the tax strategy being finalised before the end of 2023, but I am keen for Treasury to conclude this work as soon as possible so that attention can be focused on delivering items in the work plan. Mr. President, it will be no surprise that one of the key policy themes of the strategy will be a restatement of the Isle of Man's long-standing commitment to international tax standards, and that international matters will feature in this work plan. The area of international taxation continues to evolve, develop and change. I can, however, again confirm that the Isle of Man continues to meet an ever-increasing number of international standards. The assessor has been and continues to closely monitor the ongoing work of the OECD and EU, particularly in respect to what is commonly referred to as the pillars. The pillars are an agreement reached by many countries around the world to reform the international tax rules to address the tax challenges arising from globalisation and digitalisation. Progress continues worldwide towards the implementation of this two-pillar solution. Pillar 1 involves new rules which will determine taxing rights between jurisdictions for the very largest multinational businesses. Pillar 2 introduces the concept of a global minimum effective tax rate of 15% for very large groups of companies. The OECD and EU have published complex model rules for these pillars, and the assessor already has work underway, considering the effect of the pillars on the Isle of Man, engaging with the relevant small number of companies on the island that are likely to be most affected by the changes, and liaising with counterparts in the Channel Islands. Mr. President, I must highlight again that these new rules will only apply to large multinational businesses with a group turnover of more than €750 million. Significant decisions on the way forward for this island in respect of pillars have still to be taken. I expect to bring more detail in this regard before this Honourable Court prior to the summer recess. Over the last year or so, Social Security has been at the forefront of providing additional financial assistance with the increased cost of living to those who need it most. This has taken the form of additional winter bonus payments, 3 rounds of energy support payments and family support payments, and 2 rounds of long-term benefit support payments. This has been a massive undertaking for the officers in the Social Security Division, and I'm enormously grateful for the substantial amount of work they've had to undertake to deliver this, in addition to business as usual, and on the back of administering all the various previous COVID support measures. Changes to the income support rules for lone parents whose youngest child is aged 6 or over came into effect last April. I'm pleased to report that this change has had a very positive impact on those concerned, with half of them either moving into work with financial support being delivered through employed persons allowance or signing on for job seekers allowance and engaging with the employment services team on a pathway to work. The majority of the remainder moved on to other benefits more appropriate to their circumstances, such as carers allowance and incapacity benefit. Changes to the minimum work requirement for employed persons allowance for certain families were approved by this Honourable Court in July last year and came into effect from the 18th of October. I'm pleased to report that those families who have been required to work additional hours have been able to do so and continue to get their EPA support. I'm aware that in the UK, entitlement to the bereavement support payment is to be extended to surviving partners of a cohabiting couple with dependent children. It is Treasury's intention to adopt the same position on the Isle of Man from the same date as the reform is introduced in the UK. As honourable members are most likely aware, registered unemployment is currently at a 20-year low. The unemployment rate on the island has been between 0.6 and 0.7% for the last 15 months. I'm delighted to report that the proportion who are long-term unemployed, that is, those who've been registered as unemployed for over 12 months, has fallen steadily from a quarter a year ago to less than 1/10 today. Each month of 2022, the number of vacancies registered with the Job Centre was over 900. There are a wide range of schemes in place to address this, including the engagement of individuals on work placement schemes arranged by Social Security officers. Treasury have previously committed to apply the triple lock to the uprating of state pensions for this year. As UK CPI at September 2022 was significantly greater than the increase in average earnings, the rates of the Manx state pension, including protected payments, and the rates of state retirement pension, including additional pensions and graduated retirement benefits, will all increase by 10.1% from the week commencing 10th of April 2023.
Here.
This results in the full amount of the Manx state pension increasing from £202.23 to £222.67 per week, and the rate of the full basic state retirement pension increasing by £14.35 to £156.20 a week. Rates of the pension top-up will also increase by 10.1%. Overall, the cost of these increases is estimated to be £15.76 million per year, which will be paid out from the Manx National Insurance Fund. As previously agreed by this Honourable Court, the value of the Manx pension supplement for new pensioners will continue to diminish over the next 16 years. As has happened in previous years, the Manx pension scheme has been amended in order to avoid what would have otherwise have been automatic increases in the amounts payable with basic state retirement pension and legacy bereavement payments. Recognising the valuable role that carers play in our community and to provide additional support for those who may have given up or refrained from work in order to look after another person, I've decided to increase the rate of carers allowance by a further £15 a week. This builds on the 15% increase provided last year. This will result in an additional spend on this benefit of just under £500,000 a year, assisting almost 600 carers. Mr. President, I'm also increasing the maximum amount that a person can earn in any week and still retain entitlement to the carers allowance from £152 to £180. The same increase in the weekly earnings limit will also apply to the permitted work higher earnings limit for incapacity benefit. The weekly rate of bereavement support payment is to increase by 10.1%, and the lump sum payment is to increase from £3,000 to £3,500, notwithstanding that neither the weekly allowance nor the lump sum is being increased in the UK from April. As regards maternity allowance, I'm acutely aware that the maximum amount payable to employed earners has not increased since 2011. So I'm today announcing a 16.8 increase from April, which will result in the maximum amount payable to employed earners increasing from £179.85 a week to £210 a week. The same increase is to apply to adoption allowance and paternity allowance. These entitlements will be further reviewed as part of a wider review of parental leave rights, as well as the ongoing review of the Manx National Insurance Scheme and the childcare strategy. I'm also increasing the amount of lump sum maternity payment, which is payable to certain people who get low incomes, from £600 to £700. Honourable members may recall that in November last year it was agreed to reform the way in which funeral payments were calculated, by removing the specific amounts for a minister's fee, an organist's fee, and the cost of placing an obituary in the newspaper or on the radio, and increasing the maximum amount payable for other funeral expenses from £1,400 to £1,700 to compensate. I'm pleased to announce that the maximum allowance for other funeral expenses will be further increased to £2,000 from this April. As regards those benefits which are funded out of general revenue, these are usually increased relative to the rate of domestic inflation at the customary reference point. As regards to this year's review, that reference point is September 2022, when the Isle of Man Consumer Price Index stood at 9.8%. The rates of child benefit, attendance allowance, disability living allowance, income support, employed persons allowance and job seekers allowance will all be increased by 9.8% from April. The rates of the carer premium for income support and income-based job seekers allowance will be increased by just over 17% in order that recipients of those benefits are able to fully benefit from the £15 a week increase in the rate of carers allowance. The higher rate of disability living allowance mobility component is being increased by 10.1% in order that it continues to align with the equivalent UK rate, which is of particular importance to Motability customers. In addition, the maximum allowable towards housing costs for income-related benefits are being increased by 5%, rounded up to the nearest 50p, and the maximum allowable towards childcare costs for income-related benefits are being increased by 6.7%, rounded up to the nearest whole pound. Furthermore, as regards the income support property tariff, I've decided to further increase the 10% threshold by £15,000 to reflect the rise in average house prices in the island over the 12 months to September 2022. As a result, people living in care homes who receive income support and who continue to own the property they used to occupy as their home may receive up to £750 a year extra income support. Mr. President, the statutory documents giving effect to the measures I've just described are listed in the number 2 order paper. The explanatory memorandum which have been circulated in relation to these documents provide further information, including a schedule for the current rate of state pensions and social security allowances, and the rates to be introduced from the week commencing 10th of April 2023. As you will see, the measures within this budget to support the community and our frontline services are significant and come with an increased burden to government revenue and reserves. This cannot be achieved without funding in place to support them, but it's also vital that we have a medium-term financial plan contained within this year's budget to address the structural deficit. I believe this budget is a financially responsible way to ensure we maintain the continuity in delivering our key services, whilst ensuring that we continue to invest in and protect our economy to enable future growth. The title of this year's budget is Investing in Our Island Plan. This is not some glib slogan. It is essential that Treasury works with all other areas of government to make sure we support the equitable growth in our economy and to be in the position to raise significant revenue to build a secure, vibrant and sustainable future for our island. Mr. President, I beg to move item number 2 on the order paper.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to second and reserve my remarks.